So what we do on Let Us Explain is dive deep on a movie, TV show, or piece of entertainment that we can't stop thinking about for other people who can't stop thinking about that thing too. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and Arturo Zarita is caught in a time loop. So we invited on our good friend and resident floral shirt expert, Amanda the Jedi, to help us with this interview, this very special interview with the writer and the director of Palm Springs. I should have clarified, those are two separate people. We're joined by director Max Barbakow and writer Andy Siara, who are going to help us break down this time loop comedy starring Kristen Milotti and Andy Samberg, available now on Hulu. Hopefully you've checked it out, because we are going full spoilers from the top. If not, go watch that movie and come right back to the interview, or not if you just want to hear more about Palm Springs. But without further ado, let's go into the interview. I just wanted to start out talking about the idea of the time loop itself, and we are getting into full spoilers in this interview. But was the time loop something you guys consider a spoiler? How'd you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's beautiful about our Sundance experience was people got to see it without any context whatsoever. They were expecting a surreal turn, but that cat wasn't out of the bag yet. I think from the get-go, when we knew we were going to have a chance to go make this movie and a substantial amount of people would see it because we had Andy Samberg in our film, we all were very adamant and excited about the fact that no one should know anything about it going into it. That's how I like to see films too. The time loop itself evolved and came about in a very roundabout way, where we Andy and I had been working on this idea at a film school for a couple of years, just wanting to make something. And once we developed these super flawed and messy characters, it was kind of about wanting to stick them in their own personal hells, where they would have to sit with their shit and their fears of intimacy and commitment over and over again, and being stuck at a wedding, having to relive that day on the periphery of that seemed like a good idea, just on a pure level of like dramatic construction. But once the time loop came into focus, it became about wanting to do something different with that idea that felt fresh and kind of like we were playing a jazz riff on a familiar melody almost. And Andy could kind of, I feel like, speak to that, to how that construction evolved and took place.
I didn't mention off the top, Amanda and I were both at Sundance this year, so we were both lucky enough to get that experience of a more fresh viewing of it, and then again saw it more recently, and I think it's kind of my appreciation for it has grown. It's absolutely really one of the standouts I've seen this year, of course. So Andy, I'll follow up with you. The reactions to the movie, a lot of people are saying stuff like, it's an update on Groundhog Day, or it's Groundhog Day at a wedding. And when a movie like Groundhog Day does kind of loom so large over the whole time loop concept, were you doing things to kind of actively differentiate it?
When Max and I were like, should we do the time loop thing? And we're like, okay, I guess we should. It makes sense for this character. We looked at it like, because Groundhog Day is one of my favorite movies ever. Same for Max, and it is a genre in and of itself. It's not like it's but we looked at Groundhog Day. Bill Murray kind of goes through however many days, thousands of years perhaps, figures out the meaning of life to a point, and he's gifted with the day ending and the next day begins. And so our the kind of when we decided to just do it, to just do the time loop, we're like, okay, well, let's say our guy Niles, who we already knew who this Niles character was, there was many false starts of this movie. He'd already written like half or quarter versions of this movie before there was ever any time loop, so I knew him so well. And it's like, okay, let's say that character Niles has lived in this time loop for a very, very long time, to the point where he can't even remember what his life was before. He figures out the meaning of life, or what he thinks the meaning of life is, And nope, you're still stuck there. You're truly no way out of this loop. So what do you do next? And that was like, to have that as the starting point. That was always the starting point. And I mean, always, once we decided to do it. And as for like ways to differentiate it, that almost kind of just like, we didn't add Sarah's character in there to say like, well, this is different, to add a second character in there. It was more like the story that we were trying to, like, again, it was almost done through like a weird process of discovery. Like it needed it. The characters, I don't know, it sounds so pretentious, but kind of like found their way in a way. And it was not to separate it from Groundhog Day. However, just the benefit was that, yeah, it also separates it more. Having Roy's character come in there and also be trapped in there, like the character was ultimately added because we felt that was like one of the last pieces of the puzzle that we added. But Max and I both felt like there was something that was missing, like who Niall's shadow side in a way, and that's like where that character was born. And also it provided it served a plot function, as in, like, to me the biggest twist of the movie is the arrow hitting Niles. It's like that's when you think you're in one movie and you go the other way. That was the last thing that was added to the script before, but then it was, once that was added, we're like, now it makes sense. Now the puzzle is complete. It wasn't, but by that point, that was 9 months after we decided to like settle on the time loop thing too. So it wasn't like we were already kind of just committed to that. It wasn't about separating it from Groundhog Day at that point.
And it wasn't about, like, I feel like the loop was never the thing that was challenging Niles's worldview at all, because he had already given up on the meaning of his existence, and he wasn't able to break through. So he's very complacent and indifferent when we meet him. We just needed these other characters. I think they truly started as a way to challenge his belief system within that loop, and obviously they became fully fledged people. And it became like more of a two-hander with Sarah, but the loop was never the thing that the Niles was railing against, because we meet him and he's given up. We needed these other people to kind of,
yeah. Like by the time, like by when we meet him, the loop to him is nothing. It's just like he just just in a similar way. We're like, should we do the loop thing? We're like, yeah, we shrug, and we each had a sip at Tecate, and we're like, okay, well, let's do it. And that's kind of how Niles looks at the loop, like. He gets hit with an arrow, and it's an annoyance almost at that point of like, fuck, I don't want to like die slowly in the ICU. I'm gonna crawl back into the cave to start the day over again. And it's treating it not like a huge magical thing, even though it is that. It's like that and that hopefully we get through it quickly with Sarah as well. With her treating it like that as well, so it's not the thing that. I mean, it's weird to say, because it does define the movie, but it doesn't. It shouldn't define a movie, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the mundanity of it has clearly set in.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess kind of like touching on that theme a little bit. Like, obviously, this was done well before COVID really went into swing, but honestly, this movie still felt really painfully relevant at that time, because so many people suffered through those feelings of like nihilism and monotony with their day-to-day lives. So do you think this movie is hitting chords more with the viewers right now because of a result of what's going on? Or do you think it just kind of is just like the answer to just what a lot of people feel in life in general?
I mean, it undeniably is hitting chords more because of what everyone's going through. But when Max and I spent whatever the 4 years up to this point working on it, and once we like landed on it, whatever, 3 years ago, it struck a chord with us at the time. Like it's how our lives had started to feel at the end of 2016 when we decided on the time loop. And yeah, it was at that point where we just were like, this feels like life. It's I'm going to eating the same thing every morning, sitting in the same exact, like traffic has a predictability, especially here in LA. It's like everything just was so predictable in life. And then there was a moment in the script that we ended up cutting it out of the movie, but it was always like this oddly like important part to me, which we didn't shoot because it was too expensive, but it was just one single shot of Niles stuck in a ton of traffic on the 91 freeway on the way to Irvine, and we just see like he's just in that Saturday afternoon traffic and going to Irvine, like on the 91, but also on the 5, all the freeways, and it was just I wanted that it was in the script as a reminder, like, oh, this is really no different than any other day in everyone's life. Everyone's kind of stuck in the same loop. The fact that like now we are stuck in a loop in a way, it's definitely hitting people harder, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's that just kind of like caution to the wind, do whatever you want energy that becomes really fun in the center of the movie. Is that something that's been part of it since the conception, or did that come about more so when you landed on the time loop concept? Because I know you were saying that it's an idea that the two of you had been working on for a few years before actually settling on.
Yeah, it's funny because there was I saw someone say like the original idea for this was much darker.
It was like a Leaving Las Vegas type thing, more so.
Yeah,
right?
but I think what was left out of that was that it was always like an absurdist comedy Leaving Las Vegas thing. It was like from the get go, it was always tonally the same thing. I mean, working with Lonely Island, it made it far better and funnier, but it was still like that throwing caution in the wind, carelessness, sense of nihilism,
self-destruction, utter.
Yeah, it was still like all of that was still there. All of it was the Harold and Maude kind of humor. Like it was. I guess a friend had sent me like a thing that says the original thing was much darker. I was like, darker, I guess, but it was still like it was still a goofy comedy. That was our absurdist version of that Leaving Las Vegas type thing. So yeah, I don't know, Max, you can speak more.
Just kind of like maybe more. It was more just like one large montage almost.
Yes,
it was like a Death Bender. Like take that montage in the middle and then extend it both ways, and you get the Death Bender movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Death Bender movie, and that's kind of what it was. Like along kind of like a Jungian structural tract.
Yeah.
Didn't work. This is better.
Absolutely.
There's a line towards the end that really resonated with me. I felt like just talking about their relationship where they say, we're already sick of each other. It's great. And I was wondering if you were intentionally kind of going for the time loop as this metaphor for a marriage or relationship.
I mean, I got married 2015. Started again. I mean, that's the year we really started working on it, and then a time loop thing a year later. Mm-hmm. That's one of those things. I don't know if it's on a. It's again sounding so stupid, sounds so pretentious. if it's like that was maybe not the intention, but that was on a subconscious level. Absolutely, that's mm-hmm. like maybe where as in all those conversations, it was never like, oh, marriage is like a loop, man. However, like it most certainly influenced all of that, and especially that line. That's like that is such an important line, and that's maybe the most important line of the movie, one of the most important lines of the movie. So, and that that is about relationships, and I'm hoping that people can, I don't know, connect to that one.
It was like it was such a hodgepodge and a collage of elements that kind of, from a time loop to the characters and it definitely did evolve into kind of what you're referring to, but it was I don't think either of us like to work in a way where we're reverse engineering something to say, because then you're just mm-hmm. You're taking swings at themes or statements. It just it was built out from who these characters were and where we put them, and it fit pretty perfectly. I mean, it was nice that it fell into that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think it did a really good job kind of like swimming through a lot of those different themes without really seeming like it was trying too hard if it was heavy-handed. So like there's this entire classification of movies that I've kind of been calling like the post-adolescent coming of age. And I think this kind of fits into that. It's kind of, you spend so much time working on the importance of actually hitting adulthood that once you hit your 20s and even your 30s and you still really just don't know what's going on and everything still feels so weird and you feel lost. And I think this movie kind of like fills in that hole in a lot of ways and actually gives people a reason to think, hey, like life is actually worth giving a shit about in a lot of ways. So I thought that was really nice.
That was the first. Thank you. That was like the first. I remember very early on when we're like, this is going to be like some semblance of a meaningless universe, whether it's a time loop with the consequences aren't going to be lasting. Like it was always about for us like there is purpose in caring in a very meaningless world. Like that was like an idea that we talked about a lot when we were just trying to make sense of how confusing the world felt, and what you're talking about was something that felt. I mean, it was just kind of honest in our emotional inventory that we were taking in our process and figuring out what the story was. But it's always about like, what kind of person do you want to be? Those are the things you think about in your mid to late 20s and early 30s after you've already kind of like matured, so to speak. Then life comes into it and you're confronted with a whole new slew of just moments where you really have to kind of pick who you want to be and how you want to treat people in relationships, friendships, otherwise.
Yeah, it definitely shows. Yes.
Pay your taxes, etc. all that shit.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys. There's been this like uptick in the time loop genre, if that's what you want to call it, in recent years. Edge of Tomorrow, Happy Death Day, Russian Doll on TV more recently. I'm curious if either of you have idea of why maybe we're seeing so much more of this idea in movies.
I mean, it feels very, like Andy said earlier, I think relevant to what life is like now as we get past just, I guess, a certain part of the world, people who think about this stuff and make this kind of stuff like just basic survival needs and get into ruts, but like I also think just from the stuff, and I had a conversation with Samberg once about this too, just like consuming culture and in your formative years, and then that culture and that kind of work, whether it's music, literature, or film, like figuring into the stuff that you end up making when it's time for you to make stuff. And I think that maybe this is coming about, the time loop stuff, just because Groundhog Day was made 30 years ago at this point, and the culture has changed, and I didn't necessarily grow up on it, but I saw it at a formative time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these people did too, and it just is like, oh, that's important to me. Like it applies. It's time to kind of talk about that again. It's the same way that the filmmakers in the 90s grew up on 70s movies, and that movement and that feel started. And like, I know Andy and I, one of the stuff that we bonded over were those 90s movies that felt just kind of like gonzo and rebellious and really different and special tonally.
I mean it's probably the same reason that Jurassic World and the new trilogy, it's like it's time to do it again. The same reason that Stranger Things hit so hard. Yep. Is that like it's it's a balance of nostalgia and just like but it's just the same kind of stories you want to hear. Every 25 years there's going to be disaster movies that come out. You have the 70s one, you have the mid 90s ones, and I mean there's San Andreas, but there's more on the way. They just announced a Twister reboot too. So like,
ask Andy about Dante's Peak or Twister. That's a whole different.
Yeah. We could have a whole other podcast about Dante's Peak. It's a fantastic film. But I think everything is cyclical, and therefore like the reason that maybe I think you can look at that, and like the reason that there's more of these time loop movies that have popped up and TV shows is just that those are the stories that are. It's their time again. We have to do it. It's just what we are hardwired on a deeply subconscious level to want to tell and want to explore.
That's a cool way to look at it. I guess just kind of like keeping up with that a little bit, and just how you differentiate yourself in something that can feel oversaturated, but I feel like people have been doing such a great job with them lately. Did you guys know, like from the beginning, that you wanted to go more the science route versus like a magic or supernatural side of things? And did you end up consulting anybody for the more sciencey stuff that Sarah's character ends up going through?
I mean, to a fault, clearly, we when it was just me and Max, just arms locked, trying to crack this thing, we were far more going down that Jungian path, and a little bit like some Ram Dass, and just not even magic, just like more almost like a journey through the brain and the subconscious. And then it was once it got to Lonely Island, that's where they really helped us like reshape the third act. All of Sarah's like, let's actually find a way to try to get out of this loop. Let's do it with science. And there's been many movies where what's in The Martian? He's like, I'm gonna science the shit out of this,
I'm
right?
Science the shit out of
and so all of that came in once we started working with them, and then I was sent off on a YouTube spiral, and looking up science papers on the Cauchy horizon, and if I'm even saying that correctly, I'm just an idiot. And black holes and whatnot. And so like first I attempted to explain how like in theory this could be a way to get out of it based on my own like, again, I mentioned like I think it felt like one long night, but it probably was a week of me looking up this stuff. And so then I here is what I think could work, with this big giant monologue. And then we, sent it to some consultants, and just to kind of, test it a little bit. And it turns out I was pretty close, I think, on some things.
Not only were you close, but the dude, like the dude that Sarah Skypes with in the diner is this guy Clifford Johnson, who's a PhD. Astrophysicist professor at USC, and he's a consultant for all the Marvel movies and stuff, and has done it forever. Nice. And so he gave us notes on how to make it real and better. But like the thing that I think the earthquake was pretty much always in, and the cave was always in, and the glow in the cave and the earthquake opening the cave, that was always there. And the thing that I think made all the logic work, Clifford said, was just that it was caused like this rift. Like time loops don't exist; they're not really possible. But like if they did, I'm paraphrasing. If they did it like you could explain this by some physical, seismic, both literally and figuratively, like event, in the Earth. And that was I think we just got. I mean, I don't remember if you looked that up, Andy, but or we just wanted to do like earthquake stuff. But it just we got really lucky in there. He was like, "Yeah, that's sound like in your logic." So
that was a weird, refreshing thing. Is that the dinosaurs were there, earthquake was there. Like that earthquake was one of the very first things that was like. I mean, it felt like the movie needed to have this seismic event. And that wasn't even for my love of disaster movies. That was more of like we are. Again, that's where I think there was something on a deeper subconscious level, and it's about allowing that to pour out.
Totally. Something that I think is really good about the film is the way the tone is a little bit malleable, and you talk about how it integrates these elements of sci-fi and like actual part science, and there's also the more emotional moments, but you kind of balance that with dick jokes and just gags and hijinks. What was that striking that balance and kind of getting a little bit of both and keeping that energy going, like important along the way? Was it something you had to tinker with as you were making the film?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think Andy and I, when we met, initially bonded over to, tonally stuff that had blended tones and can make you laugh and make you feel things, and not necessarily, delve into science too, but like that, that's my favorite kind of stuff that has a toe kind of in every part of the sandbox.
We talk a lot about that when we first met in 2013 or whatever, on the first or second day at AFI. We talked about Eastbound and Down. I think Eastbound and Down had just wrapped up, but like that final season, those guys are so they can manage that line of like slapstick comedy to like gut wrenching, like tears, so nicely. And then like Boogie Nights was, you know, this huge movie for both of us, but especially Max seeing it at such a formative young age.
I saw it at 8 or 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but also like it's one of the funniest movies of all time, and it's slapstick stuff that and so to go from you know, these again dick jokes to true emotion. I mentioned it when I went after the Sundance stuff. I was texting with my old boss, the showrunner of Lodge 49, and I'm like, isn't that silly? Like this Sundance record with a movie about dick jokes, and he said existential dick jokes. So it makes it better.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you are fans of BoJack Horseman, but I've heard Raphael Bob Wassberg talk a bit about how it feels like when you're willing to go to some of those crazy, silly places, you're also maybe a little bit more emotionally ready to go to somewhere serious. You're, as a viewer, you're more ready to go wherever the movie leads you.
Absolutely,
I love that. Yeah.
That's how, like, again, going back to like how the original movie was much darker. Like the guiding light for me and Max always from the very beginning was from like in our other shorts too. Is like we need to go from slapstick to sadness and it's best if you can do it within one line or within the scene to scene. It's already hard enough, but like doing it within one scene, that's the goal.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job with that. There were some specific questions from people online that they were kind of wondering some answers to. So if you don't mind, maybe indulging us there. So one of the big questions, obviously, is Nana. Was she in the loop? How long? Was she aware of it?
Yeah, that last line, I suppose now that you'll be going soon.
Yeah,
has been confounding people.
Yeah.
Good.
They say grandparents say the darndest things.
Absolutely.
They've also seen a lot, you know, lived a long time.
Yeah.
I will say June Squibb is obvious. You know, she's June Squibb. She's a national treasure. Yeah, and we shot all that stuff, the nighttime stuff. I feel like that was 5 a.m. on a 30-degree night, and she came in and she just nailed it.
That's the answer. That's the answer of that one.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. That's why I said if you will indulge. It's okay if you don't want to.
Yeah.
I guess other than that, one of the other questions obviously is, do you kind of have like a general idea of how long Niles has been in the loop and then how long Sarah was actually in there? I get that it's, you know, to the core of the movie, it doesn't necessarily matter, but it's, you know, it's just always interesting to know how long somebody's been going through something.
All that mattered, the most important thing to me was that Niles, he truly cannot remember what his life was like before. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so however long that takes, this writer for The Decider, he broke it down. I was impressed by his breakdown. The reason I think I said 40 was just because I figured it's a lifetime of memories. I think Andy's about 40, so I was like, oh, so that's a lifetime that he forget. Again, that's as all I know is that he has been in there a very long time. How long that is, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did make sense.
Long enough to forget what he did for a living, you know, to forget about his past life, and long enough for you know, alcohol abuse and you know, to rot the brain a little bit, but
and to get to the moment of like that peace that he finds where where truly all to him that matters is burritos, beers, and floating in the pool every day. And like, how long does it take for one to get to that point? While also, how long does it take for them to forget their entire past? How long does it take them to know everything and every little piece of information about every single person in that desert valley, including Spuds and like his fling with Tracy Holmes at a bar in Aberdeen. Like it's that stuff just takes a long time. How long that is, I leave it up to the viewer. But I will say it is not 40 years. Or maybe it is. I have no idea.
I thought longer, honestly. You know,
Yeah, longer than 40.
when it gets to
I thought so too.
yeah.
Maybe a little less than a million.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I would say it's probably somewhere between 40 days and 40 million years.
Yeah.
So
Carry the 2 minus 3.
Yeah.
yeah.
You guys apparently wrote and even shot multiple endings to the film before settling on what we all saw. Could you guys talk a bit about some of those alternate endings and maybe why they weren't quite right?
The true, say like the kind of the punctuation or emphatic periods, if we're talking about the movie, I should say, were kind of endings were always there, which are like, you know, them deciding to go in the cave with one another and then the dinosaurs on the horizon. Like those are kind of like the benchmarks that were very much always in there. Around that stuff was definitely tried out and changed and calibrated to kind of like keep things ambiguous enough, but also to give a sense of closure to, you know, the sci-fi threads of the story and the romantic threads of the story, and also just like the batshit nihilistic energy, you know, shrug stuff that we had been playing with the entire time. I think we shot like 7 different endings. I know the original ending is probably in the script you could find online, and that's just a long monologue from Niles that gets interrupted by Sarah, and he decides to shut up, and they cheers. But there was an alt beginning that we shot, or I guess the original beginning that we shot, and there was an ending that corresponded with that we have on the cutting room floor. There's some stuff with the goat. There's some other funny improv things. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But the movie, I mean, we also tested the movie, and there are versions of the movie that ended with them, you know, ended right after they blew themselves up in the cave, and that, you know, that was an option too.
I guess just touching on that a little bit, obviously having somebody like Andy Samberg and Lonely Island involved, was there like a lot of improv going on? Like you mentioned that they, you know, really contributed to what the story ended up being, but did most of that kind of all get settled before you started shooting, or was there like a fair amount of room for improv as you were actually filming?
We had a running alt stock that was always kind of being filled up, and that we would try to get to every kind of location and every setup, because we were shooting multiple things from different moments in the movie in certain spots.
It was really helpful. I'm just on the Andy side of it all, because we worked so closely with them for 3 months before we took it out for financing. Then we continued to work with Andy, like, so we were able to like just tailor it so much to him, and then that's where like that running alt stock kind of helped out. But then there was other characters though.
There weren't like one improvised moment. The scene, so to speak, was them giving each other tattoos. That was Andy and Kristen.
Cool.
That was their creation. And then I think just within scenes with actors, you just, you know, everybody comes with ideas, just specific ones, not like this scene doesn't work, let's improvise and fix it. It's like, what if this moment was like that, or like, can I say it this way instead of that way, or like, let's fill up this moment with like a little invention here. So there are moments within every scene that are kind of embellished, because when you have Meredith Hagner and, you know, Andy Samberg and J.K. Simmons and Connor O'Malley and Jenna Friedman, and, you know, Camilla has one of the most beautifully improvised moments, I think, in the movie too. Mendez, when she smells her sister's hair, that's and says, "Oh, you smell so good!" Like after her speech, like that's a beautiful, you know, improvisation. But yeah, so no scenes like needed to be fixed, but everything was elevated with actors kind of coming with imagination, which is always what you want to make it all better.
Yeah, you got a really talented cast of people that had a lot of really great screen chemistry, like just so well done. Like
Allison Jones, the legendary casting director, cast the movie, and she's known. It was so exciting to get to work with her, because she cast Freaks and Geeks, you know.
That's awesome.
Like,
That's awesome.
You know, that's one of the talk about ensemble casts and kind of picking very, you know, specific talents to shine alongside one another. It's that was cool, like just the notion of building out an ensemble with her, and she's done all kinds of different stuff as well on from there.
Getting it back to some of the ambiguities of the plot, you end the movie, this mid-credits scene with J.K. Simmons' character, Roy, approaching Andy Samberg, who doesn't recognize him anymore, presumably because he's left the time loop. But you also have this moment where Niles and Sarah remember each other once they've exited the time loop, so it kind of leads you to wonder, like, is Roy stuck in an alternate universe? And also, like, without robbing you of the ambiguity that you want to leave there, is it important to you that moments like that are really well defined, or do you like kind of leaving some questions unanswered?
Well, I'd say if you ask that core team of me and Max and Andy and Becky and Kristen, what happens at the end, we might all have a different answer. I mean, ultimately, the movie, the emotional story ends when they walk into the cave together. That's the most important part.
Right.
Everything else is like, I feel like I know what.
I know what happens.
But I know what happens, and we might not agree on that. But I will say that everything in the movie, and we can credit our fantastic costume designer to production designer to set dressers to like all of these. Everything in the movie is there for a specific reason. So like you can. If someone wants to look into it and find what the one answer is, you can do that. You can look at the wardrobe choices and prop choices and drink choices and stuff that's on the tables in the background, and you might get an answer, or you might not.
Gonna send people on an Easter egg.
It might just be more ambiguous. So.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'd like to ask, just sort of wrapping things up. I like to ask this whenever we get a chance to interview people, what you guys have been watching, how you've been keeping yourselves busy. A lot of people are watching lots of stuff under lockdowns and trying to go on film binges. What's been keeping you two company?
Well, on Disney Plus, I have a 2-year-old, and so I watch a lot of Inside Out, a lot of Toy Story, a lot of Monsters Inc., a lot of Frozen, a lot of Moana, and it's interesting. I've actually realized that there is some like influence of Moana on Palm Springs, like this cave, and like your ancestors are in there, and like I think there was.
It's a direct line.
Yeah. It's a direct and I think all those movies are absolutely incredible. But because of that, that's what a lot of my life is. And then we put my daughter to bed, and then I'm able to stay awake for about a half hour. And so most recently, I May Destroy You is just phenomenal. That's been, and right before that, we just finished Mrs. America, and I was like, oh wow, this is one of the best acted, written, looking shows I have seen in so long. FX on Hulu. It's pretty cool. Devs before
Hulu's
that.
Where it's at right now.
Hulu's got everything.
Bomb.
I know. And that's not a plug for Hulu at all. It's more of a plug for FX, but going from Devs to Mrs. America, that was just like, it was such a treat. And then now I May Destroy You is like, just, incredible. So Max, what about you?
I May Destroy You for sure. Get into that. I've been trying to do watch movies by directors all the way through, do surveys of careers. So I'm doing I'm on a Hal Ashby kick right now, which has been cool. I watched Being There the other night,
Great,
which is incredible.
Yeah, Harold and Maude's one of my favorites.
Yeah. And my fiance was obsessed with reality television and all that, the Vanderpump stuff. And I guess there were some people in the cast that got canceled recently. So thankfully that's not on in the house anymore. But to scratch that itch, she's been on Instagram a lot, and we've been watching a lot of the NBA players in the bubble down in Orlando, live streaming their activities and their lives, which is just it's scratching that reality TV itch, but I could subscribe to that and get into that a little more. So that's been good. And I also, Rami is another FX on, I guess it might be FXX, but I'm really impressed by the second season of that show too. It's cool.
Yeah. The Team Swish IG Live is definitely a solid piece of entertainment right now.
Yeah, it's so good. It's like summer camp. You're just like, what is summer camp?
Yeah, they got the snacks and the Gatorades and everything.
Yeah, like bass fishing and water slides. Capture the flag.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. It's such a pleasure to talk about, especially such an interesting movie, one that we really enjoyed too. So, thank you so much for your answers.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank
Thanks
you
for having
for
us.
having us. It's fun.
Thanks for taking the time. Yeah.
That's all for this edition of Let Us Explain on the Intercut podcast. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. Check out more from Arturo on his channel, Let Me Explain, or at The ATZ Show and at LME Explain. And catch more from Amanda the Jedi, too, at Amanda the Jedi on her socials and on YouTube. You can also listen to every episode of the Intercut podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher. I like Overcast. And then make sure you're subscribed not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/intercutpod, where you can watch our bright, smiling faces as we run through the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of Intercut every Friday when there isn't a blackout. And please leave us a comment, like the videos, consider heading over to iTunes to give us a 5-star review. Like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, all of them are at Intercut Pod, to get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, and from all of our guests here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, well, I suppose you'll be going now.